Like it or not, the SUV is one of the fastest growing segments in the auto industry. More specifically, the sport and high-end luxury SUVs are taking over the streets. Now, Porsche have been in this game longer than most, but instead of reviewing the Cayenne S or the slightly deranged Turbo, here are two that might be the most relevant in today's world. So soccer moms, pay attention. First up is the Cayenne e-hybrid. Well, why is this such a relevant car? Well, every car class, at least in some way, has moved into hybrid territory, even all the way up to hypercars like Porsche's 918, the McLaren P1, Ferrari LaFerrari, and so on. So it only makes sense for sport SUVs to do the same. And this is sporty. It is a Porsche, of course, so it produces 416 horsepower combined through the 3-liter V6 up front and the electric motors which power all four wheels through the Tiptronic S gearbox. No, it does not in fact have Porsche's PDK, but we'll get on to more of that stuff in a little bit. So what we're going to do, because these cars are all about fuel consumption, is we're going to do a fuel consumption test with this and the next Cayenne. I'm going to drive them both on the exact same roads, same distance, same time of day, and then find out and let you guys know which one is better on fuel. But before we get into that boring stuff, let's talk about the car itself. Now, starting with the looks, the Cayenne has always been one of the most controversial Porsches, largely because of its looks. Now, personally, I think it's much improved over the years. However, in this particular green, it's very out there, if you will. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I mean, if you're buying a Cayenne, you could probably choose a lot of different colors, so that's not strictly relevant. What I do think is relevant with the interior is I think it might be a little much to put that green or that color everywhere in here. It's everywhere from on the dash, the door sills, even in the console. And the green they have on the dials in here, like their hybrid green, that's okay, but I think having it everywhere else is a little aggressive, and I wouldn't particularly choose that. But again, that's an opinion thing. But other than that, the interior is actually, it's really extremely comfortable. It's very well laid out. It's got their very nice center console thing that features in all Porsches now. And everything's where it should be. Everything is easy to access. And the steering wheel is just lovely, especially with these beautiful paddles and just the dials on the steering wheel. It's absolutely a fantastic interior, and it's a nice place to be. So what is it like to drive as a day-to-day? Well, first point, which I think is quite necessary to make, is it's very big and very heavy. And that is basically because of they've had to add the electric motors and the batteries, which are necessary to make it a hybrid, so that makes sense. But you really started to notice that weight and that size when you're in city conditions, for example, when you're parking or when you're changing lanes. And when you're changing lanes, there's a pretty big blind spot on the driver's side right here, but they do have those blind spot sensors, which are extremely helpful and have been spec'd to this car. Now, other than that, it's very comfortable, it's very smooth, especially with suspensions and settings in comfort mode. I could definitely see you using this as a day-to-day car. It can seat 5 very easily. It's very practical. Like I said, you would hope with an SUV it would be like that. Other than that, though, you can drive this car in electric-only mode because it's a hybrid. When you're driving in electric-only mode, there's this little threshold about halfway when you put your foot down on the pedal, and you can feel it. It's like a little air bubble almost. And when you pass that threshold, the combustion engine kicks in and you're flying. It's very quick. It all happens very fast, and it sort of takes a while to get used to sort of manage it a little easier. So it sort of course, shuts off electric mode. And the good thing is once you've used the electric mode, once you're completely done with all that, you can put it in e-charge mode, and without having to plug it into a wall, you can charge it up as you're driving along. If you're doing a nice long highway drive, that's extremely helpful as well. So overall, the e-hybrid is actually, it surprised me with how good it actually is. The fuel consumption is there, which is important in a hybrid. The electric motors fill up the torque gap nicely when you want to do a spot of sporty driving. It's incredibly quiet and smooth in E-mode, and it would be very easy to live with every day. It's comfortable and it's practical. So now we move on to the next one. All right, this is the Cayenne Diesel. Now, why, you may ask, is this as relevant a car as the hybrid? Well, from a technological standpoint, the hybrid is actually more relevant because of how it's put together and how it saves fuel. But the diesel is still relevant because it is also designed to use less fuel. And from the reports, it will use around the same amount of fuel as the hybrid, but as I said earlier, we will drive it on the exact same road, the same distance, and then we'll compare the numbers after. So, the figures. Powering this thing is a 3-liter V6 diesel, obviously, which puts 240 horsepower and 400 pound-feet of torque through all 4 wheels through the Tiptronic-esque gearbox. Like the hybrid, it doesn't have the PDK, but we'll get onto more of the sporty aspects later on. Because, let's talk about the looks for a minute. Now, as I said, with the hybrid, the looks of the Cayenne have much improved over the years. But it also had a very out there color. This one is actually much more toned down. The exterior color, it's very nice, it's very subtle. But moving on to the interior, this is an absolutely lovely color, just with this beautiful dark brown on top and this beige interior at the bottom. The two-tone works very nice, and it's got the same awesome console with the infotainment system, same beautiful steering wheel. It's an absolutely fantastic place to be, as most Porsches are. So what's it like to drive then? Well, much the same as the hybrid, it's very smooth and very comfortable in all manners of driving, from city roads to country roads. It's very comfortable and very smooth. However, there are still that small driver's side blind spot, but the biggest visibility compromise is on the rear seats. The middle seat has a headrest, which takes up a very good chunk of the rear windscreen, which compromises rear visibility by quite a bit. But the main difference between this and the hybrid is the hybrid had all those electric motors and the batteries, which weighed it down a lot. This obviously does not, so it's a much lighter car, and from that standpoint, it's much, much better to drive. So let's briefly talk about the boring stuff. I drove these cars 25 kilometers, the same route, same roads, same time of day. And the figures were this. The e-hybrid managed 8.8 liters per 100 kilometers, while the diesel fell short of that with 10 liters per 100 kilometers. So the hybrid is marginally better on fuel. So that brings me to, which one of these should you own? Well, other than the weight of the hybrid, there's not much to tell as a day-to-day car, other than the fuel consumption as well. They're both incredibly smooth to drive, they're comfortable, they're practical, and they are fun to drive on country roads despite being big SUVs. But if we're talking strictly like exterior and interior looks, I'd have this one because it's much more toned down color and it's actually much more of a beautiful interior, I think at least, with a two-tone. But this is just my opinion, and you can spec your own car to be whichever you like, so it's not strictly relevant, just throwing it out there. Overall though, I would have to say I would have the hybrid because it is better on fuel and that speed is much, much more exciting. I mean, in any gear, because you have the electric motors filling in those torque gaps, it's just incredibly quick. And it isn't maybe as quick as this one in the corners because it's got all that extra weight to chuck around, but I think that's a compromise worth having if you have your heart set on fuel saving in a Porsche Cayenne. So thank you so much for watching. In the last episode, I said we'd have a big announcement on this episode, and we do. It is that Driving Roads is returning. We are back Monday, July 13th. We are bigger and better than ever, better production quality, better roads, better everything. It's going to be, I'm tremendously excited about it, and I think you should be as well. So again, stay tuned for that. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to follow us on social media, facebook.com/challengeuniversity, challengeuniversityshow.com, or follow me on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at The TiVo Show. We'll see you next time. Cheers.